Hey, what's up? How you doing? It's your friend Phil, Project Management Training Coach here. This is Project Management Drive Time, and today we are in episode 1 of Knowledge Areas on the Road. And this is where I just casually chat to you about what a knowledge area is for those newbies just getting into the PMBOK guide. You see, for first timers on the PMP exam or the CAPM exam, there's a tendency to look at this stuff as being larger than it really is. I'm talking about, the PMBOK guide. A lot of times people pick it up, the sheer weight of that thing scares people. So knowledge areas on the road is really to acquaint you with what it is, bare bones, what the PMBOK guide is, bare bones. Today, the first chapter that we're tackling is actually right at the end of the PMBOK guide. It's chapter 13 on stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management. So, talking about stakeholder management is all about one thing: effective stakeholder engagement. Getting exactly what you want from your stakeholders, making sure that your stakeholders are engaged, making sure that they're showing up for those meetings, they're giving you what you want. If there are requirements you want, how do you glean those requirements from these folks? If you want some output from them, how do you do it? That's really what this chapter is all about. So it's a very pragmatic chapter when you take it and you think about what stakeholder management is. You're not really managing your stakeholder, you are managing their engagement on the project. For that reason, it takes a lot of action for the PM to get up from behind the desk, to go to the stakeholders, to speak to them, to talk to them, to explain things to them, and to actually get some output from these stakeholders. Now, a stakeholder is simply anyone that has a stake in the project, anyone who is interested in the project, anyone who can impact the project. That's really what a stakeholder is. Someone who thinks they are impacted by the project should also be looked at as a stakeholder, because these folks, they may have a high level of power, and if they wield that power, the outcome may not be very favorable if you don't put them first. Put them first, think about them, whether they think they're interested or they truly are. The PM should embrace all manner of stakeholders. Also, the PM might talk about negative stakeholders. People who do not want your project to succeed because they think it will impact them adversely, or it will impact their team members somehow in an unfavorable way. So that's really what the PM is meant to be doing in chapter 13. So the first thing PMI says you should do is identify these folks. Identify who could be impacted by your project. Don't wait for them to come out of the woodworks, you know what I mean? Don't wait for them to surface at the 99th hour. It's the job of the PM to be thinking, who could be a stakeholder on this project? This project cuts across the whole firm. Who could be impacted in business unit X, Y, or Z? That's really what the PM should be thinking about. And the PM should enlist other stakeholders who are already identified to identify new stakeholders or unidentified stakeholders. Now, when the PM is done identifying the stakeholders, the PM should casually ask, which of these stakeholders could really kill the project? Which of these stakeholders has a high level of power, a high level of interest, a low level of power, low level of interest? PMI says you could plot this on a power interest grid, and immediately it becomes clear, because if you've got power on the y-axis and impact on the x-axis, or interest on the x-axis, by the time you plot high level of power and high level of interest stakeholders, they appear in the top right quadrant, and that tells you, hey, you need to manage these guys close. You need to be like white on rice with these guys. If you abbreviate what these quadrants mean, and you can take a look at this in the PMBOK guide, it's really MKMK. M for monitor, K for keep satisfied, M at the other end for high level of power, high level of interest, manage close, and K at the bottom right, keep informed. Alright, so people with a high level of interest, keep them informed, send them reports, give them what they're looking for, and so on. That's really what identifying stakeholders is all about. So you're developing some idea, some strategy of how to engage these folks, how intensely do you need to engage these folks? And then the next process, plan stakeholder management, is where you actually put your plan together for how to engage them. Those who need to be engaged, to a very high degree. This process is all about asking the question, Phil is a stakeholder. Well, what's his current engagement level? Oh, well, he's currently clueless. He's got no idea of the project. Where do you desire that Phil should be in the next 1, 2 months, 1 week, 2 weeks on the project, or eventually on the project before the project comes to an end? And the answer could be, well, I desire that Phil be in a more leading role, that he takes charge and does what he needs to do and spreads the vision to his people and comes aboard for this new implementation that we're about to carry out. That's really how the PM should be thinking with a team. Where is Phil, the stakeholder? Where do I want him to be? How am I going to get him there? How am I going to get Phil to be in a leading role? How am I going to get him to be mega engaged? So that's really what you're doing, planning stakeholder engagement. The two things to remember here, one is the stakeholder engagement assessment matrix. Go look it up. It's pretty much what I just explained. Currently clueless, but I desire that he be in a leading role. So C is clueless. That would be Phil in the clueless position, but I desire, the letter D, to indicate where I really want him to be. And that's really what that is. And then the other piece of plan stakeholder management is the stakeholder management plan. And like I said, it's really just a plan, for how to keep your stakeholders engaged, through regular meetings or water cooler conversations or one-on-ones or what have you. But I think the key word here is intentionality. A lot of people manage projects and they don't really think about their stakeholders with lots of intention, and they're just like, well, I do this all the time. Push comes to shove, I can speak to a stakeholder, try to convince them about something, get them on board. So they have that in their head, but it's not shared. That vision for how to keep the stakeholder engaged isn't shared with the team, and the PM isn't really consciously thinking about how to do it. So PMI is really all about the intentionality. Now the next process is called manage stakeholder engagement. And this is where you actually engage the stakeholder. How do you engage a stakeholder? Different ways, but it has to be pragmatic. So you're meeting with stakeholders on a regular basis. You're speaking to them. You're sharing results. You're discussing what could happen on the project. You're making sure that their interests are satisfied. Whatever they're interested in, that's what you really want to hammer. What they're concerned about, that's what you want to hammer. And I'm talking about, your top stakeholders in the top right quadrant. Those are especially important. But that's not to say other stakeholders are not important. They are. And that's why we've got the power interest grid to tell us, the level of engagement, that we need to focus on. Someone who just wants reports, well, give them reports. Someone who wants a little bit more and has a high level of power, then make sure you're satisfying them and stuff like that. So in managed stakeholder engagement, this is where you actually carry out your plan. This is where you are actually carrying out your plan, and you are really engaging these folks. Every single way that you've identified, this is like carrying out your fantastic plan of action to keep them engaged. Now the next thing, after you've done all that and you know how to keep them engaged and you've made those plans and so on, and you've started carrying out the plan, the next thing is to ask yourself, well, is my plan really working? Because it's one thing to have a great plan that you think is the best thing, and then you carry it out and stakeholders are just disengaged. They don't show up. They're hostile when they show up for meetings. They're impatient, and they don't see any value that the project is adding. Well, it's about time for the PM to ask the question, how can I change my plan so that I get these folks back in alignment if they were before, or get them in alignment if they never were in alignment with the project goals. So control stakeholder engagement is a really important process because it corrects what is going wrong. with your stakeholders, with your stakeholder engagement. If your stakeholders aren't engaged, your plan wasn't solid enough or realistic enough. Perhaps your plan was a pie-in-the-sky idea. Now's the chance to change it. Now's the chance to get the team to sit down, speak to the team, ask the team, hey, what do you think? This is what I planned. It's not working. What can I do differently to get Bob engaged, to get Jim engaged, to get Jill and Jenny engaged? What do I need to do? And that's really what you need to do in stakeholder management. So I hope you enjoyed this first episode of stakeholder management and knowledge areas on the road, on the go. And next episode will be something not in the order that people are used to in the PMBOK guide. So I hope that helps you, and look forward to speaking to you soon.